Hi guys, this is Mike. In this Cinema 4D tutorial, I'm going to show you how to resolve Ngons triangles and removing extra lines within 3D modeling. So in a previous tutorial, I explained why you need to use quads instead of triangles and Ngons. In this tutorial, I'm going to show you how to resolve those. So in this first example, if you open Lesson 01 Begin, you can see that we have this sort of layout that has this one triangle right here in the center. And we want to protect this opening and this opening. This is the reason why we don't want to move these points around too much, because then it will make our line that we have here, say I move these 2 points and we kind of deform the shape of this opening. So I go to my knife tool and I go to my loop cut. You can see, if I zoom in a little bit, how the deformation of this loop changes with the points that I moved. So we want to protect that. So let me undo back. And we want to resolve this triangle without affecting this edge that we have for our 2 openings. You can imagine that these would be a slot or an opening for a screw for some type of hard surface modeling on a product. So how would I go about removing this triangle? The best way to remove triangles is to run a line to the edge of your model. So to demonstrate this, I'm going to go to my poly pen tool, and if I make a cut and I cut this over to this side and connect this edge here, now we have a line that runs all the way through until the edge of our model. And you can see here now I can move this point. Now we have a quad in which to work with. Except now we have another triangle. So in order to resolve this, we do the same thing as we did before, is we run a line off to the edge of our model. So I'm going to, again, put in a line all the way up to the top of the edge of this model. And now I can simply just remove this this line by either command clicking, and that just removes it. But what you can also do is you can go to edge mode, go to your live selection, select this edge, and just right click and then go to dissolve. And that will remove that triangle. So now at this point, you can just go back to your point mode and just make some adjustments to space out your polygons a little bit more. So as you can see, we protected this opening without affecting the edge on this opening, and we remove the triangle. Now there is this one little spot here that we have an opening. If you go to your model mode, you can see this little opening here. So if I go to polygon mode or point mode, you can just simply command click and drag and snap that in. Or you can use MD on your keyboard. That will bring up your closed polygon hole. You can close that as well. Now you'll notice if you go to your Lesson 01 Begin and compare it to the Lesson 01 End, that will have more polygons when using this method. So if you go to Shift V and you go to your HUD, you can choose total polygons, edges, and objects. And you can see if you go to polygon mode that we have 58 polys. And if I go to my original document that we started with, it has 51 polys. So this is an additive process when adding in these extra lines and edges. Just something to keep in mind when you're modeling. If you're trying to keep your polygons low, you want to just keep in mind that if you are doing this method where you're stringing an edge all the way to the edge of your model that you're going to be adding in more lines and polygons. In this example, you can see that I have a car panel, side panel, and we want to get rid of this Ngon right here in the corner here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to connect these points here, so we have a quad. Then I want to bring a line all the way over to the edge of our model. Rotate around here and connect this point all the way to the edge. Now you can see that we removed one point, but now we have this one line that comes down here. So what we can do is we can bring this line, bring an edge all the way down to the bottom of our car panel. Now a lot of times you'll notice that Ngons and triangles, they sort of go hand in hand, as in if you have a Ngon, in one example, if you have 5 sides, what you can then do is cut that in half, and then you'll have a quad, but you also have one triangle that you'll have to use the technique of adding an edge that goes along your model. So you can see we can quickly get rid of these unwanted geometry so that we have a better render. When we have Ngons, we have sort of a bunched up kind of look, but now when we render, you can see this will smooth things out. Now, if you ever have a model that you want to see where the Ngons and triangles are, you can go to Mode and then Modeling. And then we have a tab over here within our modeling settings. We have mesh checking, and we can enable mesh checking. So what you can then do is go through and check for, say, Ngons and bad polygons, and you can also have poles, and this will give you an idea of where your triangles and polygons and Ngons are. I made a tutorial on mesh checking, so go check that out, and so you can understand how to use this a little bit more. But it just gives you a way of finding these geometry that you don't want to have, especially when you have like a pretty complex model and you're going through it. Sometimes you make a mistake and then you end up having a triangle or Ngon. Open Lesson 03 Begin, and we're going to start taking a look at this example. A lot of times when you're modeling, you'll be making something that is somewhat complex in terms of its geometry and its lines, but then you have to match it up with geometry that's a lot lower. For an example, this hand, which has more geometry to allow for deformation, to an arm, wrist, and forearm, which has less deformation because it needs less geometry. So we take a look at this edge here, and you can see all these different lines that are coming through, but we only have a small amount of geometry on this wrist here, or this forearm. If I pull back a little bit, you can kind of see the complexity of this hand and the least complexity or less complexity of this forearm. So how do we go about going through and removing so many lines so this matches up and connects in a nice and elegant way? Well, you notice that the techniques that you have learned so far are additive. In this case, we're going to be doing more of a subtractive process. So you can see that if I go into point mode and I go into my poly pen tool, I'm going to right click and optimize, clean up some of these points that I deleted. And you can see that we have a bunch of points that we could connect together in order to reduce the amount of polygons that we have. So I'm going to zoom in over in this section. We have a pretty tight area here in terms of its geometry. So I'm going to take 3 points, 1, 2, 3, and I'm going to connect them together. Now it's easy to do with the poly pen tool. You can just simply click and snap these points together. If I undo, you can go to MQ on your keyboard. That's going to bring up Weld. You're going to select these points by going to your live selection, press the space bar, and then you can click right in the center. You can see this dot, this white dot. Now connect those up as well. So now you have a triangle here. What then you can then do is either go to poly pen tool, command click, and now you have a quad. If I, whoops, that snapped and welded. So let me just pull this out a little bit so you can see. And we can make some adjustments, and you can see now we have a quad. We have a quad here, and we have a quad here. So in this particular case, now we can extrude this edge, and now we're going to have less lines in order to connect to this wrist. So let's come over here and see if we can do this a little bit more. Say if I take, and you want to take a look at where your lines are going to be matching up. So in this case, we have one right here. So what I would like to do is bring these 2 points over and now connect and weld these points together. Pull this out, command click, and just make adjustment here. And now we have a diamond, but we still have a quad. So we have this reduction. And so you can do the same thing at the bottom over here. And just kind of taking a look at where our lines are. And sometimes it's not going to be so clean. And when you're doing organic geometry, it tends not to be. So we're going to snap these, command click, and bring these over. So when you have geometry that sometimes doesn't match up as perfect as you want it, you can go through a process in this technique to remove some of these lines. Now, you want to try to get rid of triangles as much as possible. But sometimes you just can't, or you don't have the time, or you just have the ability to just move it into a position where it's not going to cause any problem, say with a deformation. So in that case, what you can then do is you can work it over and walk your triangles over to an area that wouldn't cause a problem, in your model. So let's take a look at that real quick. Say for an example, I don't have a triangle on this model, but if you had one, say here, what you then do is add in a triangle here, command click, and work your triangle and keep doing that until you have your triangle in a spot that is not causing a problem on your model. Some place inconspicuous that's not going to be deformed, whether it be moving, bending it, or animating it, or deformation in an area that would cause problems when you're texturing. So as you can see, we have a model here. Now you can continue working, and we have a point here that I'm going to delete. So we have quads here, and you can continue working this through. And the way you do that is you'll go to UL, and let's get our select boundary loop. Let's go to edge mode. We'll click here, and then we'll go to an extrude. Now you can also command click and drag, and now bring these edges out. And maybe you need to, transform and shrink this down. And if you still have issues, and what you do is you just kind of count this up and see where your problems are. You can bridge. So let me deselect. Bridge this over. And you can see here that this could be an issue, because maybe I want to have this over here so this lines up nicely. Again, here we have an issue, because now we'll have a triangle. So you can see that we're not lining up correctly. So you just go through the same process again. If I undo, go through the same process. We have a line here. Let's go to my poly pen tool. Weld, command click. Now we have a quad. So I know this is gonna now match up nicely. Same here, but we had an issue over here. Let's command click, get rid of that guy. This is connecting fine. But now we have this issue here. Let's make a triangle here. And we're looking pretty good. But let's take a look over here. We can probably connect here. Command click. Now we have a nice quad. Now let's go through the process again. UL. Command click and drag. And now let's try to match this up again. Bridge here. Here. Whoops. Let's try that again. Let me deselect because that's a little bit distracting. Bridge here. Bridge here. Bridge here. Bridge here. And it looks like I have a bit of an issue here. That's probably where my triangle can be removed. Let's take a look. Oh, here's my triangle. Let's see if we can match this up a little bit better. Poly pen. And now I can walk this line all the way to the edge of our model, just like we did before. Just as long as you have that ability. If you don't want to keep your model at a pretty decent amount of geometry, you can do that. And now I can command click and we have a nice quad here. So let's resolve our issue here. Go to point mode. Poly pen. Let's sew this up nicely. Snap here. Snap here. Here. Here, 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 and here. And now all we have to do is go to our edge mode. Let me zoom in here so I can get this edge. And we'll go to our slide tool. We'll just simply slide this down and just make sure this is looking okay. So we just kind of spread this out a little bit. So as you can see, we would still need to do a little bit more adjusting to make this look a little bit more, a little bit better in terms of spacing out some of our polygons. But as you can see, this is a subtractive process where we're going from a lot of complex polygons into a smaller amount, instead of, like we did before, just keep running the edge along this cylinder, basically a cylinder here, and possibly giving us more lines, which would give us more geometry to have to work with and move around. So whenever possible, try to keep your polygons low, keep your lines low, so that it's easier to move around, less geometry to have to deal with. I put a link in the description to download project files. You can also go to astronomic3d.com to download project files from this tutorial and all the tutorials that I've made so far. Thanks for watching.